So all the leaders of NATO are meeting in Vilnius, Lithuania over the next few days. The major meet of the conference is going to take place on the 11th and the 12th, but leaders are starting to filter in as we speak. So I want to talk about what potentially could be the outcomes and what they're going to talk about. So the first thing obviously is going to be Ukraine's NATO membership. Ukraine formally applied to join NATO last year, but it's been acknowledged by pretty much all of the leaders of NATO, as well as Ukraine itself, that they will not be able to join NATO until the war with Russia is resolved. Even President Zelensky emphasized that while they understand they can't join NATO during the war, he wants to impress upon them that Ukraine expects membership offers after the war is completed. Now, Ukraine is seeking support from NATO allies to demonstrate that their membership bid is in progress. So they don't want to just come and say, yeah, we get it, Ukraine. They want to see some tangible movement because Ukraine has been invited to this NATO summit. However, NATO allies have some differing opinions on what they can offer Ukraine with regard to membership. Some countries are wary of repeating past mistakes and want some tangible steps offered by Ukraine itself. When Ukraine says, well, we've proven ourselves on the battlefield and should be granted a path to membership. I believe that Ukraine has the absolute right to join NATO, definitely. Many of the concerns that were previously fielded by countries in the years leading up to the war, I think those have been addressed in general and are on a path to a better Ukraine. So the most likely outcome is there's going to be a compromise where Ukraine is granted certain privileges and support, but probably falls short of a full invite, which is frustrating because there are such things as conditional invites, and it is possible to invite Ukraine to NATO without triggering Article 5. Being invited to NATO is not joining NATO. It could signal to Russia that we are serious about Ukraine's security in the future, and what Russia is doing is absolutely unacceptable. Now, Russia likely would take this as yet another escalation, to which I say, so what? Deal with it. But that would mean that arguably Russia would have more of an incentive to continue to prosecute its war in Ukraine in order to make sure that Ukraine never gains full membership because of that unfortunate condition that we cannot bring Ukraine into NATO while they're at war with Russia. So that gives the incentive for Russia to continue the conflict indefinitely, similar to how potentially maybe a ceasefire takes place, but they're still technically at war, etc. So if there are security guarantees for Ukraine, what would they be coming out of this NATO summit? Well, there could be assurances to Ukraine against future Russian aggression, and that definitely is going to be a topic of a debate. Ukraine is going to want improved security measures that are beyond the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which provided security assurances but not NATO membership. And it also didn't really tie NATO to providing specific support. It was just a broad, generalized, we will provide security guarantees and assurance, or security assurances. Words have meaning in these things. It's not a guarantee, they're assurances. Some NATO allies, including the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and the U.S., have considered providing joint guarantees on top of these assurances to Ukraine. However, there's really no clear consensus on what form these will take, and the view is that the only effective security guarantee is NATO membership. You can't make these side guarantees and these side deals. Really, Ukraine just needs NATO membership. They're also going to review what has happened since the last NATO summit in Madrid. At the 2022 Madrid summit, NATO allies made commitments to strengthen defense and deterrence. These commitments included deploying additional combat-ready forces, enhancing collective defense exercises, and establishing larger high readiness reserve for rapid reinforcement. Some of the implementation of these has been mixed, though. There's been some successes, there's been some feet dragging, and it's unlikely that all of these commitments have been fully met by this summit. There have been delays in scaling up the enhanced forward presence, multinational battle groups, and achieving the desired level of readiness across the forces in NATO, but progress is being made. And these collective defense exercises have ramped up in a way that is quite meaningful. They're doing very well of broadening this. The United States, Germany, Poland, and Romania all have training areas that are being utilized nearly on a monthly basis to increase the readiness of NATO forces. Also on the docket is probably going to be Sweden's NATO membership. It's facing objections coming from Turkey. While Sweden and NATO allies would prefer Sweden to join before this summit, so obviously the next couple days, Turkey is just not in the hurry to ratify the membership. I think Turkey's going to use Sweden's membership ratification to try to make some side deals at this summit, and potentially we would see them join. I don't think Turkey's hangups are as cut and dry as people are making them out to be. They're just trying to elicit some favorable gains for the Turkish government in this regard. And President Erdogan has indicated that Sweden should not be expected to join the alliance anytime soon. But lately, Turkey has been leaning more towards NATO assistance. I mean, they provided this prisoner exchange with Ukraine that pissed off the Russians. They're giving more field artillery pieces to Ukraine at the request of NATO. So there's been more integration of NATO and Turkey of late. So I believe that Turkey will come around in this regard, because Turkey has been very beneficial in recent weeks in assisting Ukraine. So I think Turkey's position, while it remains a concern, will probably eventually evolve. I don't think it'll change over this summit. I think Erdogan will just try to get some concessions for his own country before that he brings back to his Turkish government and they make decisions down the road, hopefully with as little delay as possible. Now, NATO's defense spending is going to come up. The war in Ukraine has prompted an increase in defense spending across NATO, yes, but only 7 countries meet that 2% target, and that's going to be something where they're going to have the defense investment pledge to spend 2% of GDP on defenses expires next year, so they're going to want to re-up that. Secretary General Stoltenberg has urged allies to view 2% as the minimum rather than the maximum target. Some allies, such as Baltic nations and Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, have committed to spending 3%. Poland aims to reach 4%, but honestly, the challenge lies in just getting the remaining members, other than those 7 countries, to that 2% of GDP's target spent on defense. They also talk about bolstering NATO's eastern flank. Obviously, that's a problem with Russia being aggressive. Leaders will be reviewing the first defense plans developed by the alliance since the end of the Cold War. They haven't had to deal with a Russian aggression situation that is realistic since then, although I would say they probably should have done this after the Crimean invasion. Didn't happen, but now, better late than never. The plans provide guidance to member nations on how to enhance their forces and logistics capabilities across the theater. There's going to be a need for these large-scale defense plans, which haven't really been seen, but with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, NATO recognizes the importance of not only having comprehensive plans, but sub-plans within that. And making plans ahead of that to deal with the Russian threat is something that's going to be very much on the docket in this NATO summit. In addition to the defense plans, NATO will address trying to increase stockpiles of ammunition, which obviously Ukraine has resulted in a rapid depletion of allied stocks. We continue to try to supply Ukraine. NATO allies will try to implement goals to set troop levels and have 300,000 troops on high alert, which is a significant increase from the 40,000. So that they're going to push to have more troops prepared to fight right now if there was a situation with Russia. And then some other administrative things may come up, like discussing the appointment of a new NATO Secretary General. The most likely outcome is that Secretary Jens Stoltenberg will be asked to extend his term for another year. He previously said that he didn't feel like extending his term. However, obviously some things have come up with regard to Russia and stuff, and having his kind of leadership would be very helpful. If he does decline, there's some candidates that they're going to consider. The Danish Prime Minister, Fredriksson, UK's Defense Secretary Ben Wallace, the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, the Estonian Prime Minister Kallas. However, they haven't really agreed on this, so as of right now, the de facto way the NATO summit is leaning is just keep Jens Stoltenberg in place as the Secretary General just for continuity, and no one really objects to that at this point. So that's kind of what I expect from this summit. We'll keep an eye on it, and I'll talk about it more as things come out.